Hey everybody, it's Janelle Stowers back here for some more tips on how you can pass your real estate exam. Today we're going to talk more about contracts. So I know that you guys are tired of hearing me talk about contracts, but contracts in real estate is such a huge deal. Ultimately, the contracts is where everything initiates or originates, and that is simply how we transfer a title. So here in the Show Me state of Missouri, on that salesperson exam, you have 19 questions that pertain to contracts. So we really tend to spend a lot of time there. So let's jump right into it. Let's talk about a contract and what a contract actually is. So a contract, of course, is a voluntary agreement between the parties. It means that nobody has gone under their contract under duress. Nobody put a gun to your head. You voluntarily signed this contract to initiate some set of promises. So let's talk about what should be contained inside of a contract. So first of all, contract has to be voluntary. It has to be an agreement. There has to be some mutual consent. The parties that go into the contract must be legally competent. There has to be some form of consideration. And then lastly, it has to be for a legal act. So now that we've gotten that part out of the way, let's talk about some different types of contracts. So we're going to focus on express contracts and then also implied contracts. When we talk about contracts, they have to be either or. They are either expressed or they're either implied. So let's look at an express contract. So in an express contract, the parties pretty much state their intentions in words, and those words could either be oral or written. So I'm sure you know, in the good old world of real estate, we would much prefer for them to be written, and in an effort for them to be enforceable, most state statute of frauds require them to be written. Now, when we look at the implied contract, an implied contract is an agreement of the parties, but most of the time that's demonstrated by their acts, okay? So let me give you an example. Maybe you had a person call in inquiring about property. You go out to their property and you show them the property and give them a little information. So by you showing the property and acting or implying as if you are their real estate agent, they may be under the impression that you are their agent, but you haven't signed any type of document or agency agreement that would allow you representation. So through your acts or through your behavior, it may be implied that you guys are working together, and that could possibly create an implied contract situation. Let's look at bilateral and unilateral contracts. So when we start talking about bilateral or unilateral contracts, again, they're either one or the other. They're either bilateral or either unilateral. Our real estate contracts are bilateral contracts. It means that the seller agrees to give you the title when you give them a certain amount of money. So that is an exchange of promises. You give me the deed, I'll give you the money. I'll give you the money if you give me the deed. So that would be a bilateral contract. When we start talking about unilateral contracts, most of the time it's just one promise that's being made. Either that promise is going to happen or not going to happen. So let's just think of our option contracts. With an option contract, sometimes you may be in the instance where, I don't know, let's talk about a rent to own. So a leasee may be able to rent a property for a certain amount of time, and then at the end of that lease, they are given the option to buy. They may not be penalized if they don't buy, but it might be an option for them. So that would be a unilateral contract. So lastly, let's look at the difference between an executed contract and an executory contract. When we talk about the word executed, the word executed is used sort of in two different areas of the contract. So first, when we initiate that offer and send the offer over there to the seller, that offer has one set of signatures. If the seller agrees, the seller will sign off on the contract, and you would have a fully executed contract because both parties have signed and are in agreement with what is contained inside of that contract. That would be an executed contract. The other time we use the word executed is when that contract has been fully performed. So that means that we've gone from the start to the finish. We've gone to the closing table and that deal has closed out. We would consider it to be executed. The other word that I mentioned was executory. The contract is in an executory state when it is in motion. That means that there are still some items within that contract that need to be fulfilled. There are still some contingencies there. There are still some duties that need to happen. So while that contract is in motion, it is considered to be executory. So let's take a step back and take a look at what we've covered today. We've talked about express contracts, implied contracts. We've also taken a look at bilateral and unilateral contracts. And then lastly, we took a look at the differences between an executed contract and an executory contract. So hopefully you are well versed on those terms and you'll use those to the best of your knowledge while you are testing. So good luck on that real estate exam and pop in next time for our next topic. See you soon.